The first year after my husband, Frank, passed away was a long, gray hallway of days. Each one looked the same, filled with the echoing silence of a house that had once been loud with his laughter. It was during that vulnerable, hazy period of grief that my daughter, Sarah, made her proposal. She sat at my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her face a perfect mask of concern. "Mom, you can't stay here alone," she'd said, her voice soft and persuasive. "This house is too big, too full of memories. It's not healthy. Tom and I have been talking. We want you to come live with us. We're a family. We'll take care of you." Her husband, Tom, nodded in agreement, adding, "We'll find a new place, something bigger for all of us, a fresh start." The idea felt like a lifeboat in a storm. To be surrounded by my daughter, my son-in-law, to be a daily part of their lives, it seemed like the perfect antidote to the crushing loneliness. So I agreed. I sold the home where I had raised my child, the home where Frank and I had built 40 years of a life together. I packed up my memories into boxes and entrusted my future to my only daughter. We found a lovely 2-story colonial in a quiet suburb. It was spacious, with a nice yard and a spare bedroom on the ground floor that was perfect for me. The down payment was significant, far more than Sarah and Tom could afford on their own. I didn't hesitate. I took a massive portion of the proceeds from the sale of my old house and wrote the check. It was nearly 80% of the new home's value. "Oh, Mom, you don't have to do this," Sarah had said, though her eyes lit up at the sight of the numbers. "I want to," I told her, my heart full. "This isn't a loan. It's my contribution. This will be our home. I'm investing in our family." For legal simplicity, they said, the deed was put in their names. "It just makes the mortgage application cleaner, Mom," Tom explained with a confident smile. I was their mother, a grieving widow looking for comfort. I trusted them. I signed the gift letter at the bank without a second thought, believing their promises were as solid as the foundation of our new home. The first few months were pleasant enough, a honeymoon period of forced family dinners and shared television shows. But slowly, like a creeping vine, the reality of my situation began to choke the life out of that initial hope. I was no longer seen as the matriarch, the investor in our collective home. I became a tenant, an obligation. My contribution was forgotten, replaced by a running tally of my perceived burdens. My presence started to feel like an intrusion. Little things at first. My favorite armchair in the living room was moved to my bedroom because it didn't match the new decor. My habit of reading the newspaper at the kitchen table in the morning was an inconvenience to their rushed, chaotic routine. Then came the financial pressures. "Mom, could you chip in a little extra for the groceries this month? With the baby coming, things are getting tight," Sarah would say. My chipping in soon became me covering the entire grocery bill. My pension, which was meant for my own small comforts, was slowly siphoned off to pay for utilities, property taxes, and eventually, their credit card bills filled with purchases for the coming baby. When I tried to gently bring it up, the mood would turn instantly sour. "Mom, do you have any idea how expensive it is to run a house this size?" Tom would say, an edge in his voice. "We took you in. The least you can do is help out." They had twisted the narrative. In their minds, they were doing me a favor, and my life savings were simply the cost of my room and board. I was an unpaid maid, an in-house ATM, and a silent, inconvenient piece of furniture. I cooked, I cleaned, I did the laundry, all while they planned their new life, a life in which I was becoming increasingly peripheral. The isolation was worse than when I had been living alone. At least in my old house, the silence was my own. Here I was silenced. The final, soul-crushing blow came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah was 8 months pregnant, irritable and swollen, and on a rampage to prepare the nest. I was in my room, reading a book, when she threw the door open without knocking. She stood there, hands on her hips, looking around my small sanctuary with a critical eye. "This room has the best light," she announced, not to me but to the air. "It'll be perfect for the nursery." I put my book down, my heart beginning to thump nervously. "It's a lovely room," I agreed cautiously. "It is," she said, finally looking at me. Her expression was flat, businesslike, "which is why we need it for the baby." I waited for her to explain the alternative, to tell me about a plan to rearrange another room. But she just stared at me, an expectant look on her face. "Okay," I said slowly, "so where will I be staying?" Sarah let out an impatient sigh, as if I were a particularly slow child. "Mom, honestly, we've been over this. There are no other rooms," she gestured vaguely towards the back of the house. "You'll move your things into the garage." The words didn't register at first. The garage, a cold concrete box filled with lawn equipment, old paint cans, and spiders. A place for cars and storage, not for a human being, not for her mother. "The garage?" I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Sarah, you can't be serious." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Tom can clear out a corner for you. We'll put up a screen or something for privacy. It's temporary until we figure something else out." But we both knew it wasn't temporary, it was a banishment. It was the final step in my erasure from the family home. I was being moved out with the rest of the junk. "The baby needs this room, Mom," she said, her voice taking on a hard, unyielding tone. "His needs come before yours. You can understand that, can't you?" The humiliation was a physical pain, a sharp, hot poker to the chest. I looked at my daughter, this person I had created, nurtured, and loved, and I saw a stranger. A cold, selfish stranger who saw me not as her mother, but as an obstacle to be moved. All the sacrifices, all the love, the money I had poured into this very house, it meant nothing. In her eyes, I was worth less than a corner of a garage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every dollar I had given them, every chore I had done, every promise they had broken. But I looked into her hardened face and I knew it would be useless. Arguing would only give her the satisfaction of a fight. She wanted me to break, to cry, to plead. It would confirm her narrative that I was a hysterical, emotional burden. And so I did the one thing she didn't expect. I fell silent. I swallowed the fire in my throat, pushed down the tidal wave of grief and rage, and I nodded. A small, triumphant smirk played on her lips. She had won. The old woman had been put in her place. "Good," she said, her tone brightening now that the unpleasantness was over. "I'll have Tom start clearing a space this weekend. We'll need you out of here by Sunday." She turned and left, closing the door on my shattered world. I sat there on my bed, the book I was reading fallen to the floor, and I did not cry. The hurt was too deep for tears. It had solidified into something else, something cold and hard and clear. An idea. They thought I was a powerless old woman. They thought my only value was in my bank account, which they had systematically drained. They thought this was their house, their kingdom, where they made the rules. They had forgotten the most important rule of all: you never, ever underestimate the person who laid the foundation. Their biggest mistake wasn't in asking me to move. It was in believing I had nowhere else to go. For 2 days, I played the part of the defeated woman. I began packing my belongings into boxes, my movements slow and deliberate. Sarah and Tom avoided me, speaking to each other in cheerful, loud voices about baby names and crib deliveries, their words a constant, painful reminder of why I was being displaced. Tom cleared a space in the garage, pushing aside rusty tools and bags of old clothes to create a depressing little nook. He ran a single extension cord from the laundry room for a lamp. That was the extent of his effort. "There you go, Carol," he said with false heartiness. "Cozy, right?" I just looked at the bare concrete walls and the oil stain on the floor where I was supposed to put my bed. I nodded silently. My compliance fueled their arrogance. They saw me as a problem that had been solved. But while I was packing boxes, I was also making plans. On the third day, a Thursday, I made a quiet phone call. It was to Mr. Davies, the family lawyer who had handled Frank's estate and, more importantly, had reviewed the paperwork when I sold my house. I had asked him for one small, extra service at the time, something I had hoped I would never need. "Hello, Carol," he said, his voice warm with kindness. "Is everything all right?" "Hello, Robert," I replied, my own voice low and steady. "I need you to execute the contingency document we prepared, and I'd like you to be here on Saturday morning, 10 o'clock sharp." There was a pause on the other end. "Carol, are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "Bring all the copies." On Saturday morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table when Sarah and Tom came downstairs, ready to begin moving my furniture into the garage. They were laughing about something, but their laughter died when they saw me sitting there, a folder on the table in front of me. "Mom, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, annoyed. "We need to get started. The crib is being delivered this afternoon." "We need to have a family meeting first," I said calmly. "Please sit down." They exchanged a look of pure exasperation. "A meeting about what?" Tom scoffed. "If this is about the garage, the decision is final." "Oh, it's about the garage," I said, my voice even. "It's about the kitchen, the living room, and every other room in this house, please." Something in my tone must have finally penetrated their thick skulls. Reluctantly, they sat down opposite me. I took a deep breath. "When your father passed away," I began, looking directly at Sarah, "you made me a promise. You promised we would be a family, that you would take care of me in our new home." "And we have," she interrupted defensively. "You have a roof over your head." "A roof I paid for," I corrected her gently. "Sarah, I gave you and Tom $450,000 for the down payment on this house. It was a gift, I know. I signed the papers. I did that because I trusted you. I trusted your promise." "This is ridiculous," Tom muttered, crossing his arms. "We're not giving the money back if that's what you're thinking." "No," I said, "I'm not asking for it back." I slid the folder across the table. "I'm asking for this." Sarah opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first page, her brow furrowed in confusion. Then her eyes widened. Tom leaned over, reading over her shoulder. His face went from smug to confused to utterly pale. Inside the folder was a legally binding document. It was a tenancy at will agreement. It stipulated that while I had gifted them the money for the house, it was done under the specific, notarized condition that I be provided with a private, comfortable bedroom and respectful living conditions for the remainder of my life. It granted me lifetime tenancy rights to my room, and it contained a particularly nasty little clause that Mr. Davies had insisted upon. If this condition were ever to be violated, if, for example, an attempt was made to move me into, say, a garage, the agreement was breached. And the breach triggered an automatic conversion of the initial gift. It was no longer a gift. It became an interest-free loan, due in full within 90 days. "What is this?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. This can't be legal." Just then the doorbell rang. I stood up and opened it. Mr. Davies stood on the porch holding a briefcase. "Robert, thank you for coming," I said. "Carol," he nodded, stepping inside. He looked at the two pale faces at the table. "I see you're reviewing the agreement. It's perfectly legal, I assure you. I drew it up myself. Both your mother and I signed it, and it was notarized on the day she gave you the check." Tom finally found his voice, a strangled, angry sound. "You tricked us. You let us believe it was a gift." "It was a gift," I said, my voice hardening. "A gift of trust. A gift you threw back in my face when you decided my home was a concrete slab next to the lawnmower. You broke the terms of the gift, Sarah, not me." Mr. Davies stepped forward, placing his briefcase on the table with a definitive click. "The situation is quite simple," he said in his no-nonsense lawyer's voice. "As of this morning, when Carol informed me of the breach, you have a debt to your mother for $450,000. You have 90 days to repay it. If you fail to do so, we will place a lien on this house and begin foreclosure proceedings." The reality of the words washed over them. Foreclosure, debt, they had a mortgage on the remaining balance. There was no way they could secure another loan of that size. They would lose the house. They would be ruined. All the designer baby furniture, the new SUV in the driveway, their entire lifestyle, it was all built on my money, and I was taking the foundation back. Sarah started to cry, not tears of remorse but tears of pure, unadulterated panic. "Mom, please," she sobbed. "We can't. We'll be homeless, the baby." "You were perfectly willing to make me homeless in my own home," I reminded her, my voice devoid of pity. "You were going to put me in the garage. Did you think about me, about my comfort, my dignity?" They had no answer, but I continued, letting the word hang in the air. "I am your mother, so I am going to offer you a choice. An option that is far more generous than the one you offered me." I slid a second set of papers across the table. "This is a quitclaim deed. You will sign this house, which I paid for, over to me. The title will be transferred to my name, free and clear. The debt will be forgiven. In exchange, I will allow you to live here. You will become my tenants." "Tenants?" Tom spat the word like it was poison. "Yes. You will sign a formal lease agreement. You will pay me monthly rent at a fair market rate. You will pay for your own utilities. I will live in my bedroom, and the baby can have the guest room upstairs. You will treat me with respect in my own home. If you violate the terms of the lease, I will have you legally evicted. Those are your two options: become my tenants or find a way to pay me back nearly $500,000 in the next 3 months. The choice is yours." The room was silent, save for Sarah's ragged sobs. They were trapped, checkmated. They had backed a supposedly helpless pawn into a corner, only to discover that it was a queen all along. Their faces were a canvas of shock, rage, and the bitter, dawning realization of their complete and utter defeat. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, and that mistake was about to cost them everything. The aftermath was not a joyful victory, but a grim, necessary reordering of our world. There was no grand explosion, just the quiet, grinding collapse of their entitlement. After a long, tense silence, with Mr. Davies standing by as a silent witness, they signed the papers. Tom's hand shook with rage as he scrawled his name. Sarah's signature was smudged with tears. The quitclaim deed was signed. The lease agreement was signed. The house was mine. The very next day I began to move my things back into my room. Tom and Sarah watched in sullen silence, their faces grim. The power dynamic had shifted so completely it was palpable. The air in the house was thick with their resentment, but it was a powerless resentment, and that made all the difference. I was no longer the silent servant. I was the landlady. "Tom," I said a few days later, finding him on the couch watching television, "the front lawn needs mowing." He just grunted. "The lease you signed stipulates that you are responsible for yard maintenance," I added calmly. "If you'd prefer, I can hire a service and deduct the cost from the security deposit you'll need to pay me on the 1st of the month." He was off the couch and out the door in under a minute. Sarah tried to fall back into old habits. "Mom, what's for dinner?" she asked one evening, walking into the kitchen. "I'm not sure what you and Tom are having," I replied cheerfully, stirring the small pot of soup I was making for myself. "But I'm sure you'll figure something out." The baby, a boy they named Leo, was born a few weeks later. The tension in the house did not dissipate. They had hoped, I think, that the arrival of their son would soften me, that my grandmotherly instincts would override the new rules. They were mistaken. I loved my grandson, but I refused to become their built-in, unpaid nanny. I would hold him, coo over him, and babysit on my terms when I offered. When they tried to leave him with me so they could go out, I would politely remind them that my babysitting rates were $20 an hour. They never left him. Their lives became a struggle. The rent they paid me, combined with their mortgage payment and the loss of my financial contributions, stretched them to their absolute limit. The fancy SUV was sold, replaced by a sensible used sedan. The designer clothes and extravagant purchases stopped. They were living the life they could actually afford, and they hated it. Their friends would ask what happened, why the dynamic in their home had changed so drastically. They would lie, of course, making up stories about a difficult housing market or a change in finances. But the truth was there, in their tired eyes and the forced smiles on their faces. I, on the other hand, began to live again. I used the rent money to hire a cleaning service and a gardener. I redecorated the living room, putting my favorite armchair back in its rightful place. I hosted my book club, and my friends filled the house with laughter, something it had been missing for a long time. I was no longer an intruder in their space. They were tenants in mine. It was a difficult, painful solution. I had to effectively foreclose on my relationship with my daughter to save myself. I had lost the fantasy of a warm, multi-generational family home, but I had gained something far more valuable: my dignity. I had reclaimed my home, my security, and my peace of mind. Sometimes I see Sarah